Kobe wife pregnant and y'all females out here defending her, talking about, oh, she's allowed to move on. Actually, no the fuck she not. And when you got kids by a motherfucker like Kobe Bryant, you ain't never supposed to disgrace his legacy. See, this be y'all problem. Y'all think she on the same scale as y'all when she not. You gotta understand. You got pregnant by a regular person in the hood who got smoked by trying to rob the wrong person. Not her. She got pregnant by the Black Mamba. She's supposed to die a legend, just like him. If it was up to me, she wouldn't have access to no more funds or my estate. Tell your new dude to pay for your lifestyle.
All right, Shalom. I want to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. I like to give double honors unto the apostles and the artists of Great Millstone, who I learned this truth from, and I like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. And today, the inspiration for this video comes from, the clip that I featured in the beginning, where you pretty much have this guy, going on a rant because, Kobe Bryant's, widowed wife, remarried and, is with child, by her current husband, which is nothing wrong with, excuse me, Slakia. And one thing, this man fails to realize, which, I somewhat understands where you're coming from, that, her husband was Kobe Bryant and that she should have, remained unmarried, but she's not wrong if she does, get another husband because, again, her husband died, so she's not, doing anything wrong. That's actually lawful what she did, So I'm just going to, bring out a few scriptures. Lord willing, this lesson is edifying and straight to the point, and I'm going to entitle this, Widowed Women Can Get Remarried, and, that is lawful. So I'm going to start with the book of Romans chapter 7 and verse 1. It says, Know ye not, brethren, for I speak to them that know the law, how that the law hath dominion over a man as long as he liveth. For the woman which hath an husband is bound by the law to her husband so long as he liveth. But if the husband be dead, she is loose from the law of her husband. So then, while her husband liveth, she be married to another man, she shall be called an adulteress. But if her husband be dead, she is free from that law, so that she is no adulteress, though she be married to another man. And yes, in this case, Vanessa Bryant is not an adulteress. We already know what happened to Kobe Bryant, back in 2020, he, died in a helicopter crash, and she's a widow, her husband died, so there's no telling, how long she's been single. And, from his standpoint, I just want to mention that, that she's not Judith, she's not Judith, which, I'm going to get a couple, scriptures out of, Judith, but she's not her, because she was an honorable woman. Her husband died and she remained unmarried, for as long as she lived, because that's how much honor and respect she had toward her husband, though she would have been, it would have been lawful for her, to get remarried, but she remained unmarried, until she died. Or better to put it, better she remained unmarried, for the remainder of her life, and that's, that's not going to be the case for, most women, because you have an extremely hard time finding a woman like that you'll get married to, and somehow, well, I won't say somehow, but, if you were to perish, the Heavenly Father called you back to the spirit world, and, that your wife that you are with remains unmarried, that's not always the case. Most of these women, jump to the next man, but what that woman did, again, is lawful. She didn't do anything wrong. She didn't play the harlot. Her husband died, obviously, she probably, needed a man. She had that feeling, so, she didn't want to be alone. And that's the most, that's the case for most women, most women don't want to be alone, and it's understandable, That's why the Heavenly Father created, woman for the man. And I say it like that because that's the order, man. The Heavenly Father created woman for the man, And again, just like it says, marriage is forever. That's a lifelong thing. It's not a, temporary as long as you live. That's the reason why they say when people get legally married, the pastor, preacher, or whatever, and he'll say, until death do you part, And that's what verse 2 and 3 is going into. A woman is bound by the law of her husband. So as long as her husband is alive, she cannot deal with another man, else she'll be an adulteress, and she could be put to death. Obviously now in today's society that won't happen. He'll likely get a divorce and, it's like and depending on how it goes, 9 times out of 10, the judge is going to rule in her favor and she's going to take half of, her husband's, wealth or whatever he has, But in the ancient world, if a woman were to play the harlot, and deal with another man while her husband was alive, she would be put to death, because that's the only reason a woman will be able to deal with another man or get remarried is if her husband died, because she's bound, or she's free from the law of her husband, So real quick, I'm going to jump to the Apocrypha, to the book of Judith, chapter 8. I'm going to start at verse 1. And it says, Now at that time Judith heard thereof, which was the daughter of Merari, the son of Ox, the son of Joseph, the son of Ozel, the son of Elsia, the son of Ananias, the son of Gideon, the son of Raphaim, the son of Akitho, or Akitho, if I'm pronouncing it right, Slakia, the son of Elu, the son of Eliab, the son of Nathaniel, the son of Samuel, the son of Salasado, the son of Israel. It says, and Manasseh was her, and Manasseh was her husband of the tribe of her tribe and kindred, who died in the barley harvest. And right, Judith, she was a Simeonite, a Simeonite, which today are so-called Dominicans. So if Judith is back on the earth today, 9 times, she may be a different tribe, but Judith was a Simeonite, just to, put it plainly, she was a so-called Dominican. Her husband was as well, Verse 3, for as he stood overseeing them that bound sheaves in the field, the heat came upon his head, and he fell on his bed and died in the city of Bethulia. And they buried him with his fathers in the field between Dothaim and Belamo. And again, her husband died of heat stroke, while he was out in the fields working, And what did she do? Verse 4, so Judith was a widow in her house 3 years and 4 months. And she made a tent upon the top of her house, and put on sackcloth upon her loins, and wear her widow's apparel. And she fasted all the days of her widowhood, save the eves of the Sabbaths and the Sabbaths, and the eves of the new moons, and the new moons, and the feasts and solemn days of the house of Israel. She was also of a goodly countenance, and very beautiful to behold. And her husband Manasseh had left her gold and silver, and men servants and maid servants, and cattle and lands, and she remained upon them. And there was none that gave her an ill word, as she feared Yahweh greatly. And again, she was a righteous woman, And like you said, she feared the Heavenly Father, and her husband left her, he left her wealth, you know, he was well off. And obviously, she was well taken care of, so she didn't have anything to worry about, you know. So that's, could also be, a contributing factor to why she remained unmarried, man. She loved her husband, she honored him, and, he took care of her, but he died, working out in the field, again from heat stroke. Now, 9 times out of 10 in today's society, if, a man were to perish, a woman probably, won't remain unmarried. She'll move on eventually, because again, a woman, especially if she really loves her husband, she may not remarry, you know. And this is the case for Judith, she honored, her husband, and she remained unmarried. But again, in the case of Vanessa Bryant, she is not doing anything wrong. So this dude doesn't know what he's talking about. Now, again, like I said, I understand where he's coming from. Yeah, she's the, the widowed wife of Kobe Bryant, but he says she's supposed to die a legend. Well, she's not a legend. Her husband is, man. And Kobe Bryant is one of the greatest basketball players, to ever do it, but overall, she's just known for being his wife, I don't really know what else she does or what she's famous for besides being his wife. That's really it, so she's not really that important, but at the same time, her getting pregnant by another man and getting remarried she didn't do anything wrong, and then I will say this too as well, man. Some of you Jakes, y'all, man, it's sickening the way y'all be heavily invested in these people's lives, man. These celebrities' lives more than y'all own sometimes, man. Like who gives a damn, And I'm just bringing this out just for edification's sake, man, because certain things like this have to be brought out, because again, she's not wrong for what she did. She's bringing forth a child by another man. Again, her husband is gone. Kobe Bryant is dead. So her husband perished, so she's she's bound, or not bound, Slakia. Get tripped up with my words a little bit, but she is free from the law of her husband. Because again, if he was alive, then, she obviously could not, deal with another man, especially bring forth a child by another man. Because that would be adultery, which adultery is unlawful. That is a sin unto death. So I'm going to get the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 7 and verse 8. And it says, I say, therefore, to the unmarried and widows, it is good for them that they abide even as I, meaning, because the Apostle Paul, he didn't have a wife, he was a single man, but pretty much telling those women, that were unmarried or widows, that it's good for them to, just to be by themselves. Verse 9, it says, but if they cannot contain, let them marry, for it is better to marry than to burn. It says, and yeah, man, obviously, we're human, man. We all get that urge, man, especially women, after a while, man, they have that urge. So pretty much even, with men, pretty much what the Apostle Paul is saying is that, if you can't go without, then just marry, then to have that, says to burn, meaning, you have that passion, you are horny, just to put it plainly, man, because again, we're all human, man. We all have needs, man, and that's, a basic need right there, yeah, I ain't even got to go into detail, man. I don't, but, again, it's like it says, it's better to marry than to, pretty much burn, but again, she didn't do anything wrong. She got remarried, her husband perished 5 years ago, so she needed a man. You women need men, regardless of how you feel about it. You need men. And the one thing, the only thing a man can put his wife away for is adultery. Because if she wasn't divorced, she couldn't get remarried, to another man. She would have to reconcile, with her husband, or if she were to separate from her husband, she would have to, reconcile and get back with him only, But this is the only reason a man can put his wife away, or get a divorce. This is Matthew chapter 5 and verse 31. It says, "It hath been said, whosoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a writing of divorcement. But I say unto you, that whosoever shall put away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, which is adultery, causeth her to commit adultery, and whosoever shall marry her that is divorced committeth adultery." So right, again, she's not a divorced woman. She is a widow. Her husband died, so she is able to remarry another man. But if Kobe Bryant was alive and, he were to divorce her, and she would have to remain unmarried. According to the law, she would have to remain unmarried. And if she were to reconcile, she would have to get back with him only. But other than that, if a woman gets divorced from her husband, she's supposed to remain unmarried. But if a man causes this woman to, commit adultery by divorcing her for whatever reason, he may not be happy with her anymore, he doesn't love her anymore, whatever the cause may be, then she goes and gets with another man, then they're both, pretty much committing adultery, because that man, the husband of that woman caused her to do it, So again, widowed women can get remarried. This dude, Kobe may be his favorite basketball player, but whatever. What she did was lawful. It's not wrong. She didn't do anything wrong. Again, her husband is in the spirit world. He perished. So she is free from that law. She is able to remarry, And also, just like in the book of Tobit, I want to make mention of this too. It just came to mind. Sarah, I think that was her name. Tobias's wife, in the book of Tobit, Tobit's son Tobias, his wife, she had a few husbands, but they all died, man. The demon Asmodeus killed all the men, that pretty much were to be married to her, because it's pretty much ultimately set up for Tobias to, be her husband, But again, as long as a woman is married to a man and that man dies that she was married to, she is able to remarry, But if her husband is alive, she is not able to remarry and or deal with another man, So yet again, Vanessa Bryant isn't doing anything wrong, man. What she did is actually lawful. So, Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and the artists of Great Millstone, who I learned this truth from, and I'd like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. Till the next time I see you, Shalom.